I upgraded my Himalayan 411 suspension to the performance suspension from YSS. I've been riding it around for 5,000 kilometers with it, and here's how it's going. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So after clocking 45,000 kilometers on my Himalayan 411, I was looking for options to upgrade my suspension, especially the rear one. It was getting close to the end of its life, especially after constantly pushing it to its limits. I was looking forward to upgrading it to something more equipped for off-road riding. The Himalayan 411 is undoubtedly one of the best motorcycles in its segment equipped for off-road riding. However, I have found that the weakest link in the whole setup is the suspension. It is mainly because the OEM suspension is designed to keep the comfort of the general population in mind and not for the enthusiast who wants to push it to its limit, especially in the off-road terrain. So for me, as and when I improved my skills riding off-road, I felt that the stock suspension is a little too soft and plush. So as I was getting more and more into off-road riding, it made sense to invest in a good suspension which I can push to its limits off-road. And as you know, there are quite a few options available for the Himalayan 411, and I went with the YSS suspension. I've used it for more than 5,000 kilometers now on all kinds of terrain, and here's my take on it. Before I get into the pros and cons, let me talk about the features of the YSS suspension. So the YSS suspension comes as a whole upgrade kit for the Himalayan 411. The preload adjustability at the rear monoshock is not by the click mechanism like you have in stock. It's by a screw mechanism so that you can make fine tunes and fine adjustments to the preload. And it's also rebound adjustable, ranging from 1 to 10, where 1 being the softest and 10 the hardest setting. It also has 2 stops of height adjustment also in case you want a little bit increase the seat height. The front fork upgrade kit comes with 2 linear springs instead of the progressive springs like the stock. It also has preload adjustability and has a PD valve which I think it controls the oil flow rate. YSS recommends the use of 20W grade fork oil, so I went with 20W grade from Liquimoly. Now coming to the pros and cons of suspension as a whole. The first pro that I noticed is the incredible traction it provides. Now I always thought that the suspension has only one function, and that is comfort, but I was so wrong. Reading and watching more videos about suspension made me realize that it has 2 main functions which are equal in proportion. That is, first is comfort, second is traction. I never understood this concept until I got the YSS suspension. Once you set the preload or the sag according to your body weight, the traction this suspension provides is insane. It completely transformed my Himalayan 411 on the dirt. The speed and force with which a suspension compresses will translate how much comfort it gives, and the speed and the force with which the suspension rebounds will translate roughly into the traction it gives, because the tires need to be in contact with the ground for the most number of time to give the maximum amount of traction. The stock suspension did an excellent job in compression and giving you comfort, but as and when you picked up pace on the dirt, when you try to go faster and faster over rough terrain, we used to feel that the suspension is compressed all the time and it didn't give enough feedback from the terrain. This made me feel less and less in control of the bike when I was trying to go faster and faster over off-road terrain. And eventually you are forced to slow down to a point where the suspension can actually rebound and give you enough traction and feedback from the terrain to keep the bike in control. Now this is where the YSS suspension shines like a star. The compression and rebound of the whole setup is so much in sync that it gives a lot of comfort, traction, control and feedback of the terrain through a wide range of speeds. This will allow you to push your bike to its limits and go faster and faster over undulations without losing control and feedback and not compromising on the comfort. It will actually allow you to go faster and faster in off-road terrain. That is when I realized it's not all about the engine power or the capacity of the engine that allows you to go fast. It's actually the suspension and the tires that allow you to go faster and faster and pick up pace in off-road terrain, because they are the ones giving you more traction and feedback and letting you be in control of the bike over those terrains so that you can pick up the pace as much as you want. You will notice that you are always in contact to the ground no matter how fast you are going, and you will be able to get the feedback from the terrain almost instantaneously. So you'll be able to make quick judgments on the off-road terrain, which will help you to stay in control and pick up pace. You will actually get the confidence to push yourself and to improve your skills and to make use of the suspension and the bike as a whole to have maximum fun on the dirt. It's a night and day difference between the stock suspension and the YSS, especially on off-road. The second pro of the whole unit is the feedback and the control it gives. Now, like I mentioned in the first point, because of the improved traction that you get from suspension, you will also get a nice feedback from the terrain you are riding on, so that you will get a lot of control over the whole bike. If set up correctly, the whole bike starts to act as a one unit. The stock suspension, the front and the back, used to behave in 2 distinct or 2 separate ways. When you run over an undulation, the front used to behave in a certain way way and the rear used to behave in a certain way. This always made the bike act like two halves stitched into one. But with YSS, it is not like that. The front and back behaves in the exact same way if set up correctly. So you'll not get multiple jerks or multiple movement from a single undulation. You'll get only one single movement. This makes the bike feel as a whole single unit instead of two units stitched as one. You will easily notice the difference between a stock and the YSS when you run over such undulations. The bike behaves as a single unit which gives you more control. This improves as you pick up speed, because when you pick up speed, the time taken for the undulation to travel from the front wheel to the back wheel becomes minimal and minimal. The bike starts acting like one single unit more and more. In the stock suspension, when you pick up speed, because the bike behaves separately in two distinct ways in the front and the back, it used to kind of throw you off and give you a sense of losing control, so that you have to slow down to make the bike behave in a certain way. To gain back the confidence, you have to slow down and then go along. But in YSS, it's totally the opposite. The faster and faster you go, the more and more the bike starts to act like a single unit, and more you'll gain control. This whole thing keeps the balance and the control in check, and thus it helps you push the bike more and more to its limits when going off-road. And that is how the YSS suspension makes the bike actually faster when you go off-road. Now the third main pro of the suspension is there is no bounce at all. The YSS is amazingly comfortable yet steady as a rock. I don't know how this works. It works like magic. For instance, in the stock suspension, when you're traveling at high speeds on the highway, like around 110-120 km per hour, even if there's a small undulation, the bike quickly jumps and bounces. This throws you off guard and you'll start to lose control. And then you have to wait till the bike stops bouncing, or you have to slow down so that you will gain control back, and then you can pick up the momentum again. This usually used to happen in the stock where it used to bounce a little bit. Either you have to wait till it finishes bouncing, or you have to slow down till you gain control and then you have to pick up momentum again. This used to happen at high speeds, especially on the highways. The YSS, on the other hand, it's a totally different story. Whenever you go over an undulation at very high speeds on the highway, it elevates once and bam, it comes back, sticks to the ground and acts like normal. Nothing ever happened. It's that instant. There is no bounce, there is no waviness, there is no sense of loss of control, nothing. It just elevates, dump. It sits there, well planted on the ground, and it goes on. You don't have to slow down, you don't have to panic, you don't have to do anything. It is that planted on the highways. Even when you take small jumps on the bumps and all that stuff, the stock used to bounce a little bit and then continue along. The YSS jumps, it lands and then comes right back up, and it is well planted. It doesn't bounce or waver around and take time to settle in. It somehow works like magic with no bounce and no waviness. It's very planted and stable, yet it will not compromise on the comfort. All these pros give you a great deal of confidence to pick up pace, especially when you're going off-road. It helps you enjoy the bad terrains as it is meant to be enjoyed on a 411. It truly unlocks the potential of the Himalayan 411. You will be amazed at how fast you are picking up pace and improving your skills because there's a whole unit of suspension supporting you. Now coming to the cons of suspension. The first con is it's a little firm. Now I wouldn't consider this as a con at all, but some people would consider it. That's why I have to mention it as a con. The YSS is a little bit stiffer and firm than the stock suspension. So in crawling speeds, when you are going very slow over undulations, over a little bit of off-road terrain, or even on broken tarmac, it'll feel a little bit jittery and a little bit stiff. Here is where the stock suspension shines. At slow paces, stock is very good in absorbing all this and gives a nice comfort level. But YSS can feel a little jittery. But try to pick up pace on this kind of broken tarmac or off-road terrain on the stock suspension and it gives up control. But YSS, try to pick up the pace, it'll shine. It'll become more comfortable, it'll become more plush while giving you a lot of confidence and traction. So when you pick up the pace with the YSS suspension, it acts like a magic carpet and just flows along. Now the second con that I want to talk about is the adjustability on the rear shock. The linkage system on the Himalayan 411 makes it difficult to adjust the preload and the rebound setting on the YSS suspension. The preload you can adjust to a certain level using the lever that they have provided. You can adjust it while you have the bike on the central stand or the paddock stand, and you can adjust it to a certain level. The rebound clicker you can access only if you expose the top section. So every time you want to adjust the rebound, you might have to take it to a mechanic. So that can become a little troublesome till you get to the right setting that you want. Now coming to the cost of suspension, the YSS isn't cheap. The front fork upgrade kit costs around 23,000 rupees and the rear monoshock costs around 33,000 rupees. And together with the installation charges and the fork oil and everything, it'll come up to around 59,000 rupees. Now, is it a value for money product? Absolutely yes. After the aluminum rims on my 411, which I made a separate video about, I think the YSS suspension is an absolute value for money product for the Himalayan 411. It makes the Himalayan 411 act like it's on steroids when you go go off-road. The difference in confidence and the improvement in handling it gives is night and day between the stock and the YSS. Now, who is this suspension for? Well, the YSS suspension isn't for everybody. If you use your Himalayan 411 primarily for small city commutes and once in a while long highway tours, then the stock suspension is good enough. You don't need to change it at all. But if you are planning to go more and more off-road to more and more trails, if you're planning to attend more dirt track sections, and generally if you want to up your skill off-road, or if you do long distance highway touring at very high speeds like 110, 120 km per hour, and if you feel that your stock suspension is kind of giving up on you, where you will feel a loss of confidence and loss of control when you go at high speeds or in off-road, then you are ready to experience this YSS magic. Now, some of you might ask, there's another Indian brand that makes aftermarket suspension for the Himalayan 411, which is called the Zedling suspension. Now, how is it compared to the Zedling? Should I get the Zedling or the YSS? Now, most of you know I sold my Himalayan 411 a while ago and took the KTM 300 Adventure S. So before selling it, I had actually sold the suspension unit, the YSS suspension, separately to a friend of mine, and he had a Zedling unit. So before selling the bike as a whole, I took his Zedling and I gave my YSS to him. So I use a Zedling suspension for around 1000 kilometers, both the front and back. Now, I don't want to make a separate review video on it because I just use it for 1000 kilometers, so it wouldn't be fair on my part to make a separate review video on it with just a 1000 kilometer experience on it. But here's how it compares to the YSS suspension. So I got to ride with the Zedling suspension in short city rides and one dirt track section. So both off-road and broken city tarmac I got to use with the Zedling suspension. Now, I must say that it behaves similar to the stock suspension. I would say it is a milder upgrade to the stock suspension, but it comes nowhere close to the YSS suspension, especially in terms of the confidence and the performance it gives off-road and in high highway speeds. So some of you had asked me, can I upgrade to the Zedling instead of the YSS because Zedling is much cheaper than the YSS? Would it give me the qualities of a YSS for the much cheaper price? Because YSS, as you know, is imported from Thailand. But I would say either go for the YSS or keep the stock. Zedling is not much of an upgrade from the stock. It is a mild upgrade from the stock. It behaves nicely. It behaves better than the stock, but you would not notice a big deal of improvement like how you notice with the stock and the YSS. So I would suggest that if you are not in the need of YSS, don't go for the YSS. Keep the stock, maybe adjust the preload and the sag in the rear and experiment with a heavier grade fork coil in the front. A better fork coil like a 15 or a 20 grade based on your requirement. But if you are looking for an absolute performance of a beast suspension, then YSS is the best. So all in all, YSS suspension is a bang for your buck upgrade for your Himalayan 411. If you have installed it, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. That's it for today's video. I hope you guys liked it. See you in the next one. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.